The twin suns of Xylos beat down on the endless sea of crimson sand, a merciless glare that turned the air into a shimmering, suffocating furnace. Captain Eris Thorn, his flight suit torn and caked with the planet's rust-colored dust, dragged his boots through the dunes, each step a monumental effort against the crushing weight of heat and despair. His water recycler had been slagged in the crash, his emergency beacon was silent, and his hope was fading faster than the sweat on his brow. In this desolate expanse, a man could lose a staggering amount of fluid, over 900 milliliters an hour, and without a source survival was measured in mere hours. He was a ghost walking, a relic of a failed reconnaissance mission. His only company the howling wind and the ever-present specter of death. Then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a mirage, a cruel trick of his dehydrated mind. But as he stumbled closer, the shape resolved into something both impossible and heartbreakingly real. She lay half-buried in the sand, her form slender and elegant even in its stillness. Her skin was a deep, regal purple, a stark and beautiful contrast to the barren landscape, and her long white hair was splayed around her like a silken halo, already gathering a fine layer of dust. She was humanoid, but there was an otherworldly grace to her, a fragility that seemed utterly out of place in this brutal environment. Her eyes were closed, her chest barely moving. She was dying, left here to be reclaimed by the desert, a forgotten treasure in a world of red death. Eris's own exhaustion vanished, replaced by a surge of desperate urgency. He dropped to his knees beside her, his throat too dry to call out. He checked for a pulse at her neck, his fingers finding a faint, fluttering rhythm beneath her cool, smooth skin. She was alive but barely. He knew the rules of desert survival: shade, water, and time. He had none of those luxuries, but he would make them. With the last of his strength, he unzipped his heavy flight jacket and draped it over her, creating a small, precious pocket of shadow over her face and torso. He then began to dig, not for water, but for cooler sand. He scooped away the scorching surface layer, piling it around her to insulate her from the radiant heat, until he reached the marginally cooler earth beneath. It was a basic, instinctive act of preservation, the kind of knowledge that separates the living from the dead in such a hostile place. www.odyssey.com. He sat back on his haunches, his own head spinning. He had no water to give her. The thought was a physical pain. He remembered his training, the desperate measures one must take. He looked at his own forearm, at the veins standing out against his sunburned skin. It was a mad idea, born of desperation and a strange, immediate sense of protectiveness he couldn't explain. He pulled out his survival knife, its blade glinting in the harsh light. With a grimace, he made a shallow cut across his palm. The blood welled up, dark and vital. He then gently lifted her head, cradling it in his arm, and let a single drop fall onto her parched, cracked lips. Her reaction was instantaneous. Her eyes flew open, revealing irises of a startling, luminous violet. They were wide with shock, then confusion, then a dawning, profound horror as she saw the blood on his hand and understood what he'd done. She tried to pull away, a weak, guttural sound escaping her throat. "No," she rasped, her voice a dry whisper that was somehow melodic. "Your life, not for me." Her words were in a language he didn't know, yet he understood their meaning perfectly, as if they were imprinted directly onto his mind. It was a gift of her people, a telepathic empathy that transcended speech. "I'm not giving you my life," Eris managed to croak, his own voice sounding alien to his ears. "Just a little of it, to buy us some time." He held her gaze, willing her to understand, to accept his help. Slowly, the panic in her violet eyes subsided, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. She stopped struggling and allowed him to hold her. He let another few drops of blood touch her lips, and this time, she accepted them, her throat working as she swallowed. A faint flush of color returned to her cheeks, a stark purple against the white of her hair. "My name is Eris," he said, knowing she would understand. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she touched her own chest with a trembling, slender finger. "Lyra," she whispered. Her name felt like a secret, a promise spoken on the edge of oblivion. For the next few hours, they existed in a fragile bubble of shared survival. Eris kept the shade over her, using his body to block the worst of the sun when his jacket wasn't enough. He told her stories of his home, of green fields and cool rain, painting pictures with his words to distract her from her pain and thirst. Lyra, in turn, shared fragments of her own story through their silent connection. She was a warrior of the Varelian hegemony, a proud race known across the galaxy for their honor and their skill in battle. Her ship had been ambushed by Krellian raiders, savage mercenaries who cared nothing for the old codes of war. She'd been part of a diplomatic escort, a mission of peace that had turned into a slaughter. She'd fought valiantly, taking down 3 of the raiders before a plasma bolt to her leg had brought her down. The Krellians, seeing her as a broken prize, had dumped her on this forsaken rock, a slow and humiliating death sentence for a warrior who deserved a blade in her heart, not the sun at her back. "They left you here to die," Eris said, his voice thick with a rage that burned hotter than the desert sun. "That's not just cruelty. That's cowardice." Lyra's violet eyes hardened. Cowardice is a luxury they cannot afford. They are beasts. They do not understand honor, only profit and pain. She tried to shift, wincing as her injured leg protested. The wound was angry and swollen, the flesh around it an unhealthy shade of gray. Infection was setting in, a death sentence all its own in these conditions. Eris knew they couldn't stay. The night would bring its own dangers. Freezing temperatures and predators drawn to the scent of blood and weakness. They needed to find shelter, and they needed to find it soon. He looked at Lyra, at her proud, defiant face, and knew he couldn't leave her. He would carry her if he had to. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded, her jaw set with determination. With his help, she managed to get to her feet, leaning heavily on his shoulder. Her weight was surprisingly light, but every step was agony for her, and a monumental effort for him in his own weakened state. They moved slowly, a single limping entity against the vast, indifferent desert. Eris scanned the horizon, his eyes burning, searching for any sign of refuge. A rock formation, a canyon, anything as the suns began their slow descent, painting the sky in violent hues of orange and purple that mirrored Lyra's own skin. They saw it. A jagged line of black stone on the horizon, a fortress of basalt rising from the sands. Hope, a feeling Eris had thought long dead, flickered back to life in his chest. They pushed on, their progress agonizingly slow. Just as the last sliver of sun vanished and the first stars pricked the cooling sky, they reached the base of the cliffs. There, hidden in a deep cleft, was the entrance to a cave. It was dark, cool, and blessedly silent. Inside, Eris helped Lyra lie down on a bed of smooth, cool stone. He used the last of his strength to gather some dry scrub brush from outside and, using his plasma pistol on its lowest setting, managed to start a small, smoky fire. The feeble light revealed the full extent of her injuries. The leg wound was bad, but it was the deep gash on her side, hidden by her simple tunic, that worried him most. It was seeping a clear, viscous fluid that smelled faintly of ozone. "I have no medicine," Eris said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I can clean it, but that's all." Lyra placed a cool hand on his arm. Her touch sent a jolt through him, a strange mix of calm and electric energy. "Your blood is my medicine," she said softly, her violet eyes holding his. "It has already done more than any salve from my world could. Your life force, it is strong, pure." He didn't understand the science behind it, but he trusted her. He cleaned the wounds as best he could with a scrap of his undershirt and water from his last canteen, the last of their shared resource. He then offered his wrist again. This time Lyra didn't hesitate. She took it gently in her hands, her touch reverent, and pressed her lips to the fresh cut he made. As she drank, a strange warmth spread from the point of contact through his entire body. It wasn't painful. It was intimate, a terrifying and beautiful exchange of life. When she was done, she released his wrist, her eyes now bright and alert. The gray pallor around her wounds had receded, replaced by a healthy, vibrant purple. "The bond is formed," she whispered, a hint of awe in her voice. "You have given me your essence, Eris Thorn. In my culture, this is the deepest of connections. You are now my life mate." Eris stared at her, stunned. "Life mate? I just wanted to save your life." Lyra smiled, a small, sad smile that held galaxies of unspoken emotion. To save a Varelian's life with your own blood is not a simple act of charity. It is a declaration, promise. You have tied your fate to mine. Before he could process this, a low, guttural growl echoed from the mouth of the cave. Their firelight cast long, dancing shadows, and within those shadows, 2 pairs of yellow, slitted eyes appeared. The desert predators had found them. Eris scrambled for his plasma pistol, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was exhausted, wounded, and facing unknown beasts. He had one shot, maybe two, before the power cell died. He stood in front of Lyra, a human shield for an alien princess, his body screaming in protest but his will unbroken. The creatures stepped into the light, large, reptilian things with armored hides and rows of needle-sharp teeth. They hissed, saliva dripping from their maws. Just as the first one lunged, a blur of purple and white shot past Eris. Lyra, her face a mask of cold fury, met the beast not with fear, but with the honed instincts of a warrior. She moved with a speed and grace that belied her recent near-death state. She sidestepped the creature's charge, grabbed its armored tail, and used its own momentum to hurl it into the cave wall with a sickening crunch. The second predator hesitated, confused by the sudden reversal. In that moment of hesitation, Lyra snatched Eris's fallen knife from the ground. She didn't throw it. She flowed towards the beast like liquid shadow and drove the blade deep into the soft tissue beneath its jaw. The creature collapsed, twitching, and was still. She stood over the bodies, breathing heavily, her white hair wild around her face, her purple skin gleaming with sweat and a fierce, primal energy. She turned to Eris, her violet eyes blazing. "They will not take what is mine," she declared, her voice ringing with a power that filled the small cave. She walked to him, her movements now gentle, and took his face in her hands. "You saved me from the sun, Eris Thorn. Now I have saved you from the night. We are bound, not just by your blood, but by our actions. Our fates are one." Outside, the desert night stretched on, cold and infinite. But inside the cave, a new story was just beginning, written in blood, fire, and the unlikeliest of bonds between a stranded human and a warrior queen left for dead. Their journey was far from over. The Krellian raiders were still out there, and her people believed her lost. But for the first time in days, Eris Thorn didn't feel alone. He felt a strange, terrifying sense of purpose, and the quiet, steady presence of a woman whose very existence defied the desolation around them. The desert had tried to claim them both, but it had failed. They had found each other, and in that discovery, they had found a reason to fight their way back to the stars. The fire in the cave had dwindled to a bed of glowing embers, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of the desert night. Eris sat with his back against the cool stone wall, his plasma pistol resting across his knees, his eyes fixed on the dark entrance. Lyra was beside him, her breathing slow and even, the deep gashes on her leg and side now sealed over with a faint, pearlescent sheen that glowed softly in the dim light. The blood bond, as she called it, was more than just a cultural formality. It was a living, tangible thing. He could feel it, a low thrum of energy connecting them, a shared awareness that made his own exhaustion feel distant, muted by her renewed vitality. He was still reeling from her declaration. Life mate. The word felt too grand, too final for a man who had been counting his own minutes just a day ago. Yet, looking at her, the proud set of her jaw, the impossible grace of her form even in sleep, he couldn't deny the profound shift in his reality. He had saved her, but in doing so, he had been irrevocably changed himself. Their fragile peace was shattered not by a beast, but by a sound far more chilling, the whine of anti-grav engines. It was a low, mechanical hum that grew steadily louder, cutting through the silence of the desert like a blade. Eris's blood ran cold. It wasn't a rescue ship. His own vessel was a smoldering wreck miles away, and no one from his fleet knew his exact location. This was something else. Lyra's eyes snapped open, her violet gaze instantly sharp and alert. She didn't need to ask. She felt his spike of fear through their bond. "Krellians," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "They are hunting me." Eris moved to the cave's edge, peering out into the star-dusted night. A sleek, black skiff, its hull matte and non-reflective, hovered just above the dunes, its searchlights sweeping the ground like the probing fingers of a predator. They were methodical, searching the area where her escape pod must have crashed. They hadn't given up. They wanted her alive, or they wanted to make sure she was truly dead. "We can't stay here," Eris said, his mind racing. The cave was a dead end. Lyra nodded, her expression grim. "There is a path," she said, pointing to a narrow fissure in the back of the cave, almost invisible in the gloom. "It leads down into the old aquifer tunnels. My people used them centuries ago, before the planet's core cooled and the water vanished. They are unstable, but they are our only chance." They slipped into the fissure just as the Krellian skiff's lights washed over the mouth of their cave. The tunnel was cramped and damp, the air thick with the smell of ancient stone and dust. They moved in single file, Lyra leading the way with an uncanny sense of direction, her white hair a pale beacon in the absolute darkness. The bond between them was their only guide, a silent current of shared intent and emotion. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a vast, subterranean cavern. In the center, lit by a strange, bioluminescent fungus clinging to the walls, was a sight that stole Eris's breath. It was a ship, but unlike any he had ever seen. It was organic in shape, its hull seemingly grown from polished obsidian and mother-of-pearl, covered in intricate, glowing glyphs that pulsed with a soft, internal light. It was a Varelian royal courier, a vessel of immense power and beauty, half buried in the sand of the dry cavern floor. "My father's last gift to me," Lyra said, her voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and pride. "He foresaw the betrayal. He hid this ship here, a final sanctuary." She walked towards it, her hand trailing along its smooth hull. The glyphs flared brighter at her touch, responding to her presence. "But it is damaged. This primary power core was sabotaged before I fled. It has enough energy for life support, but not for flight." Eris's heart sank. A sanctuary that was also a prison. He examined the ship's access panel, his engineer's mind kicking in despite his fatigue. He saw the problem immediately. A cracked energy conduit leading to the main drive. It was a delicate piece of alien technology, but the principle was universal. "I can fix it," he said, a spark of his old self returning. "I have my multi-tool. I can jury-rig a bypass using the power cell from my plasma pistol. It won't be pretty, and it won't last long, but it might give us enough juice to get off this rock." Hope, fragile but real, bloomed between them. As Eris worked, splicing alien circuits with human tools, Lyra stood guard at the cavern entrance, her senses stretched to their limit. Their bond was a constant stream of information, his focused concentration, her watchful anxiety. He managed to reroute the power, and with a low, resonant hum, the ship's interior lights flickered to life. The console screens glowed, displaying a star map of the sector. "We can make it to the neutral trade station on Viridian 3, Lyra said, her fingers flying over the controls. "From there, I can contact my loyalists. We can expose the traitors who allied with the Krellians." Just as she initiated the launch sequence, the ground trembled. A massive explosion rocked the cavern entrance, showering them with dust and debris. The Krellian skiff had found them, but it wasn't just a skiff anymore. Through the newly created opening, Eris saw the hulking, insectoid form of a Krellian heavy assault crawler, its multiple legs digging into the sand, its main cannon swiveling to aim directly at their fragile sanctuary. "They brought a tank?" Eris muttered, his hands tightening on the controls. That Lyra's face was a mask of cold fury. "They will not take me. Not again." She turned to him, her violet eyes locking onto his. "Eris, there is something you must know. The blood bond. It is more than a promise of partnership. In Varelian biology, a human's genetic material is compatible with ours in a unique way. Your blood didn't just heal me. It awakened something." Before he could ask what she meant, the crawler fired. The blast struck the ship's shield, which flared brilliantly before collapsing. The ship groaned under the strain. They had seconds. "Go!" Lyra yelled, shoving him towards the pilot's seat. "Get us in the air." Eris slammed his hand on the throttle. The ship, its makeshift engine screaming in protest, lifted off the ground just as another blast tore through the space where it had been. They shot out of the cavern and into the star-filled sky, the Krellian crawlers cannon firing wildly after them. The ship was sluggish, its power fluctuating, but it was airborne as they broke through the upper atmosphere. Lyra slumped in her seat, a wave of dizziness washing over her. She placed a hand on her abdomen, her expression one of profound shock and wonder. Through their bond, Eris felt it too. A new, tiny pulse of life, a third presence joining their connection. Her words echoed in his mind, clear and undeniable. "Your blood didn't just save my life, Eris Thorn. It gave me a new one. I am with child." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He was going to be a father, to an alien child, on a crippled ship, fleeing a vicious enemy, with a woman he'd met only a day ago who was now his life mate and the mother of his unborn child. The universe, it seemed, had a spectacularly dramatic sense of humor. Their fight for survival had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more precious. The stars ahead were no longer just a path to safety. They were the future of a new, impossible family. The crippled Varelian courier shuddered as it breached the atmosphere, its jury-rigged engine whining in protest against the strain. Below them, the crimson desert of Xylos was a shrinking wound on the planet's surface, but the Krellian assault crawler was already launching a pursuit skiff from its back, a black wasp chasing a wounded bird. Eris's hands were slick with sweat on the controls, his mind racing faster than the ship's faltering systems. He had to get them to Viridian 3, but at their current speed and power, they'd be overtaken long before they reached the safety of the trade station's defense grid. Lyra, her hand still resting on her abdomen, closed her eyes, her face a mask of intense concentration. "There is another way," she said, her voice strained. "The ship's core, it can be pushed beyond its limits, but it will burn out completely. We will have one chance, a single, massive jump. But the destination is not of my choosing. The emergency protocol will take us to the nearest Varelian safe world." "That's a huge risk," Eris countered, his eyes darting between the navigation screen and the rapidly closing of the Krellian skiff on their tail. "What if it's a trap? What if your traitors are waiting there? What choice do we have?" Lyra's violet eyes met his, filled with a desperate courage. "We fight for our future, Eris. For our child's life. Trust me." He saw the truth in her eyes, the same fierce will that had faced down desert predators. He nodded. "Do it." Lyra's fingers flew over the console, inputting a complex sequence of glyphs. The ship's hum deepened into a roar, the lights on the bridge flaring to an almost blinding intensity. The energy conduit Eris had repaired began to glow red-hot. Outside, space itself seemed to warp and twist. The pursuing Krellian skiff fired its plasma cannons, but the bolts dissipated harmlessly against the building energy field around their ship. With a final, deafening crackle of power, the courier vanished in a flash of light, leaving the Krellians in the empty void. They re-emerged not in the bustling lanes of a trade hub, but in a system of breathtaking, silent beauty. A single, blue-white star cast its gentle light upon a world of emerald continents and sapphire oceans, all cradled by rings of glittering ice. The ship, its power core now dark and dead, drifted helplessly towards the planet's gravity well. "This is Ethel," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with awe and a deep, personal sorrow. "My home, my father's world." She explained that Ethel was the ancient, secret heart of the Varelian hegemony, a place hidden from all charts, protected by layers of cloaking technology and gravitational anomalies. It was here that the true royal line resided, away from the political machinations of the outer colonies. The traitors who had sold her out to the Krellians could never have found this place. Their powerless ship was caught by the planet's automated defense network. Instead of being destroyed, it was gently guided by tractor beams towards a landing platform built into the side of a mountain that seemed to be made of solid crystal. As the ramp lowered, they were met not by soldiers, but by a delegation of Varelians, their skin various shades of purple and indigo, their white hair flowing like rivers of moonlight. At their head stood an older man, his face lined with wisdom and grief, his eyes the same luminous violet as Lyra's. "Father?" Lyra breathed, tears welling in her eyes. The man, Emperor Valerius, rushed forward and enveloped his daughter in a powerful embrace. His gaze then fell upon Eris, the human who stood protectively beside his child. He saw the makeshift bandage on Eris's palm, the exhaustion on his face, and the quiet strength in his stance. Through the bond he shared with his daughter, he felt the truth, the blood given, the life saved, the new life begun. "You are Eris Thorn," the Emperor said, his voice resonant and kind. "My daughter's life-mate. You have not only saved her from a dishonorable death, but you have restored the future of our house." He placed a hand on Lyra's stomach, a look of profound joy spreading across his features. A new heir born of two worlds, a symbol of hope. In the weeks that followed, Eris found himself in a world of impossible grace. The crystalline palace of Ethel was a place of serene beauty, its halls filled with soft light and the gentle music of wind chimes made from singing stone. He was no longer a stranded soldier, but a prince of a new order. He learned of Varelian culture, of their deep connection to life and honor, and he found his own pragmatic, human resilience was not just accepted, but admired. The threat from the Krellians and the traitorous Varelian faction was not forgotten. From their new stronghold, Emperor Valerius, with Lyra as his general and Eris as his chief strategist, began to plan their counterstrike. Eris's knowledge of human military tactics, combined with Varelian technology, forged a new kind of warfare, one based on precision and honor, not the Krellians' brute savagery. But the heart of their story was not in the coming war, but in the quiet moments. In the garden of glowing flora, Eris would sit with Lyra, his hand on her growing belly, feeling the faint, strong kicks of their child. A daughter, the palace seers had confirmed, who would carry the legacy of both her parents. He would tell her stories of Earth, of its oceans and forests, while Lyra would weave tales of the stars and the ancient songs of her people. Their bond, forged in the crucible of the desert, had blossomed into a deep, abiding love, a partnership of equals from two different worlds years later, after the traitors had been brought to justice and the Krellian threat had been decisively broken. A grand ceremony was held in the heart of the Crystal City. It was not a coronation, but a wedding, a formal joining of Eris Thorn, the human from the Red Sands, and Lyra, the warrior princess of the stars. They stood before their people, their hands clasped, their daughter, a beautiful child with her mother's purple skin, her father's determined eyes, and a shock of white hair, standing proudly between them. Their life was not one of endless peace, for the galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but it was a life built on a foundation of sacrifice, courage, and an unbreakable bond. Eris had gone to Xylos a man with nothing, and he had returned a husband, a father, and a hero of two worlds. The scorching desert that had sought to claim them had instead become the birthplace of a legend, a testament to the fact that even in the most desolate places, life, love, and hope could not only survive, but thrive. The wedding on Ethel was a confluence of two worlds, a celebration that shimmered with the quiet dignity of Varelian tradition and the warm, boisterous joy of human spirit. Eris, in a formal tunic woven from starlight thread and deep indigo silk, stood before the crystalline arch, his heart full to bursting. Lyra, radiant in a gown of living silver that seemed to flow like liquid moonlight, her white hair braided with blossoms from the palace gardens, took his hands in hers. Their daughter, Liana, now 3 years old with her father's curious eyes and her mother's regal bearing, stood beside them, holding a small bouquet of glowing blue flowers. The ceremony was simple yet profound. They didn't just exchange vows. They reaffirmed the blood bond that had saved them, weaving it into a promise for their future. Emperor Valerius presided, his voice thick with emotion as he declared their union official, not just in the eyes of their people, but in the fabric of the universe itself. The gathered Varelians, their faces alight with hope, sang an ancient harmony that resonated through the very stones of the city, a song of new beginnings. Their life together was a beautiful, chaotic symphony of love and family. The grand palace halls, once echoing with solemn silence, now rang with the laughter of children. Liana was just the first. Over the next decade, their family grew, each child a unique miracle blending their two lineages. There was Kalen, a boy with his mother's fierce violet eyes and his father's stubborn jaw, who loved to tinker with old human tech in the palace workshops. Then came twins, Alara and Soren, whose skin held a soft lavender hue and whose hair was a cascade of platinum, always getting into trouble together in the floating gardens. And finally, little Mira, the baby of the family, whose quiet observation and uncanny empathy hinted at a powerful telepathic gift even stronger than her mother's. Eris never lost his human pragmatism. He became the bridge between the Varelian hegemony and the scattered human colonies, his unique perspective forging alliances and trade routes that brought prosperity to both peoples. He taught his children about Earth, about its history, its music, its simple joys of a sunset over an ocean. Lyra, in turn, taught them the ways of their Varelian heritage, their history, their honor, and the deep spiritual connection to the life force of the universe. Their home was a place of warmth and acceptance. Human engineers worked alongside Varelian artisans, and the palace kitchens were a delightful fusion of spicy alien fruits and hearty human stews. Evenings were spent in their private garden, Eris telling stories of his desert rescue while Lyra would correct him with a playful nudge, her eyes sparkling with love. "You make it sound so dramatic, my life mate," she'd say, her hand resting on his. "Because it was," he'd always reply, pulling her close. "It was the moment my life truly began." The galaxy was not without its shadows, but they faced every challenge together, a united front of love and strength. Their children, raised on tales of their parents' impossible love story, grew up to be leaders in their own right, embodying the best of both their worlds. They were a living testament to the idea that difference was not a barrier, but a source of incredible strength. Years turned into decades. Eris's dark hair silvered at the temples, and Lyra's luminous violet eyes held the gentle wisdom of a long and happy life. They would often sit on their balcony, watching their grandchildren, some with purple skin, some with pale human complexions, all with a mix of their shared legacy. Play among the glowing trees. The scorching desert of Xylos was a distant memory, a harsh prologue to a story of unparalleled joy. They had been given a second chance at life in the most desolate of places, and they had built a paradise from it. Their love, born of sacrifice and sealed in blood, had not only saved one life but had sparked a new dynasty, a family that numbered many, whose laughter filled the halls of a crystal palace under alien stars. They had everything they had ever needed: each other, their children, and a peace that was hard-won and deeply cherished. Theirs was a happy ending that wasn't an end at all, but a vibrant, ongoing legacy of love that would echo through the stars for generations to come. Their wedding on Ethel was a union of two worlds, witnessed by stars and sung by the wind through crystal spires. Eris, in indigo silk, held Lyra's hands, her silver gown shimmering, her violet eyes bright with joy. Their daughter Liana stood between them, a living promise of their bond. In the years that followed, their love flourished like the glowing gardens of the palace. One child became two, then four, then more, a joyful chaos of laughter echoing through ancient halls. Kaelin built starship models in the workshop. The twins raced through floating orchards. Little Mira soothed hurt animals with a single touch. Eris never forgot the desert, but he no longer feared emptiness. His life was full, overflowing with family, purpose, and a love that deepened with every passing season. He served as an ambassador, weaving human resilience with Varelian wisdom, building bridges across the stars. Lyra, once left to die in the sands, now ruled beside him, not as a queen alone, but as a partner, a mother, a warrior at peace. She taught their children honor, history, and the quiet strength of compassion. At night, they'd sit on their balcony, watching moons rise over emerald forests, their fingers intertwined. Their home became a haven where human songs mingled with Varelian harmonies, where earthborn tales were told beneath alien constellations. Their children grew strong and kind, proud of both their lineages, shaping a future brighter than either world had dreamed alone. Time silvered Eris's hair and softened Lyra's gaze, but never their devotion. Grandchildren came, some with purple skin, some with human eyes, all bearing the mark of a love that defied fate. They played among the luminous trees, their voices carrying the same hope that had once flickered in a desert cave. The galaxy still held dangers, but their family was their fortress. In each other's arms, they had found not just survival, but a life of profound joy. They had been given a second chance, and from it they built an eternity. And so, under the gentle light of Ethel's twin moons, Eris and Lyra lived out their days, surrounded by the many children of their impossible love. Their story a quiet legend of rescue, redemption, and a happy ending that never truly ended.